Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The sun hung low on the horizon, casting golden rays over the endless sea, its vast expanse shimmering like molten gold. Legends had spoken of this sea, but those who dared venture into its heart rarely returned to tell their tale. Sailors whispered about an island hidden within its depths, an island said to hold unimaginable riches, but guarded by something far more dangerous, a force of magic so powerful that it warped the very seas around it. Captain Elwyn stood at the helm of the Serpent's Eye, his seasoned gaze fixed on the horizon. His face, weathered by years of salt and sun, bore the scars of countless voyages, each one etched with memories of battles fought and dangers faced. But this journey was different. This time, he wasn't just after wealth. The island, if it existed, held something far greater than treasure, something that could change the course of the world. The wind tugged at his coat as his crew went about their tasks, a ragtag group of men and women hardened by the sea. Elwyn had chosen them carefully. Each had a reason to be here, some for gold, others for glory, but none knew the true purpose of the journey. Elwyn kept that to himself, for now. "Captain," a voice called from behind him. It was First Mate Coulson, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a sharp wit and sharper eyes. He stepped up beside Elwyn, his expression serious. "The crew's getting restless. They've heard the stories. They know what lies ahead, or at least they think they do." Elwyn nodded, his hand tightening on the ship's wheel. "Let them talk. They've sailed into storms before. This one's no different." Coulson raised an eyebrow. "No different, you say? I've been with you long enough to know when you're hiding something, Elwyn. What's really out there?" Elwyn didn't answer immediately. Instead, he glanced up at the darkening sky. "The island's not just about gold, Coulson. There's something else, something more dangerous than the storms. If we find it, we'll need more than just skill to survive." Coulson frowned, but before he could press further, the lookout's cry rang out from the crow's nest. "Storm ahead! Magic storm!" The crew froze, their faces paling. Magic storms were the stuff of nightmares. They didn't just tear ships apart, they twisted the sea itself, warping reality, swallowing sailors whole. Elwyn's heart pounded, but his voice remained steady. "All hands on deck," he bellowed. "Secure the rigging, brace the sails. We ride this storm, or we die trying." The crew snapped into action, their fear evident but overridden by the instinct to survive. Elwyn's grip on the wheel tightened as he steered the ship directly into the storm. The wind howled, and the sky darkened until it was as black as night. Lightning crackled across the clouds, but it wasn't normal lightning. It shimmered with a strange, unnatural glow, tinged with colors that didn't belong in this world. The ship lurched as the first wave hit, nearly tossing Elwyn off his feet. He gritted his teeth and held firm. The Serpent's Eye was built for this, strong, swift, and reinforced with enchanted wood that could withstand the worst the sea had to offer. But even so, it groaned under the strain, as if the sea itself was trying to pull it apart. "Hold fast!" Elwyn shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of the storm. The ship pitched and rolled, water crashing over the sides. The crew clung to the rigging, their faces pale with fear. For hours, they fought against the storm, the wind screaming in their ears, the sea boiling beneath them. But slowly, impossibly, they pushed through. When the storm finally began to recede, Elwyn allowed himself a brief moment of relief. They had survived. But as the sky cleared and the sea calmed, a new danger presented itself. A group of crew members, led by a man named Rook, had gathered near the bow, their eyes fixed on Elwyn with suspicion and greed. Rook had always been ambitious, always looking for an opportunity to seize power. Elwyn had expected as much, but not so soon. "We've been through hell and back, Captain," Rook said, stepping forward. His hand rested on the hilt of his sword. "And for what? You promised us gold, but all we've gotten so far is death and storms. We deserve to know what's really out there." Elwyn met Rook's gaze, his expression unreadable. "You'll get your gold, Rook. But this isn't just about treasure. The island holds something far more valuable, something that could destroy us all if we're not careful." Rook sneered. "You think I'm afraid of a few old stories? We're here for riches, and we'll take them, whether you like it or not." Tension crackled in the air. Elwyn's hand rested on his cutlass, ready to draw if necessary. "You'll do well to remember who's in command here, Rook. We've survived this long because I know these waters. You don't." Rook's eyes flickered with uncertainty, but before the situation could escalate further, a new cry went up from the lookout. "Land ho!" All eyes turned to the horizon, where a faint outline of an island had appeared, shrouded in mist. The crew murmured in awe and disbelief. After weeks of perilous sailing, they had finally reached their destination. Elwyn's heart raced as he steered the ship toward the island. As they drew closer, the mist parted to reveal a landscape unlike anything they had ever seen. Jagged cliffs rose from the sea, crowned with lush, untamed forests. But there was something unnatural about the island, an otherworldly energy that seemed to pulse through the air. The crew disembarked cautiously, their eyes wide with awe and fear. Gold gleamed in the sunlight, strewn across the beaches like discarded treasures from a forgotten era. But Elwyn's attention was elsewhere. He could feel the magic here, thick and oppressive, like a living thing. It wasn't just the island's riches that had drawn him, it was the power hidden beneath the surface. As they explored the island, they stumbled upon an ancient temple, half buried in the jungle. Its walls were covered in strange runes, glowing faintly with the same unnatural energy that permeated the island. Elwyn's pulse quickened. This was what he had been searching for, but as they ventured deeper into the temple, the dangers became clear. The magic here was volatile, chaotic, and dangerous. The crew began to grow restless, their greed outweighing their caution. It wasn't long before Rook and his followers made their move. In the heart of the temple, surrounded by ancient relics and forgotten treasures, Rook drew his sword. "This is where it ends, Captain," he sneered. "You've led us to our deaths. I'm taking what's mine, and I suggest the rest of you do the same." The crew looked torn, their loyalty wavering. Elwyn's hand rested on his cutlass, but he knew that violence would only make things worse. The magic of the island was unpredictable, and a fight here could trigger something far more dangerous. "You don't know what you're dealing with, Rook," Elwyn said, his voice calm but firm. "This magic, it's not something you can control. If we're not careful, it'll destroy us all." But Rook wasn't listening. His eyes gleamed with greed as he stepped closer, his sword raised. Elwyn had no choice. In a swift, practiced motion, he drew his cutlass and parried the blow, the sound of steel ringing through the temple. Chaos erupted. Rook's followers charged, and the temple echoed with the clash of swords and the crackle of magic. Elwyn fought with the precision of a seasoned warrior, but even he couldn't control the forces at play. The magic of the island began to react, the air crackling with energy, the walls of the temple trembled, and the ground beneath them shifted. Ancient runes flared to life, glowing brighter and brighter as the magic reached a boiling point. Elwyn realized too late what was happening. The magic was too powerful, too volatile. If they didn't stop fighting, the entire island would collapse. "Enough," he shouted, his voice cutting through the din, "stop, or we'll all die." But it was too late. The magic erupted, sending a shockwave through the temple. The ground buckled, and the walls began to crumble. Rook's eyes widened in horror as he realized his mistake, but there was no time to react. The temple collapsed around them, the magic consuming everything in its path. Elwyn barely managed to escape, dragging the few loyal crew members who had survived the chaos. They stumbled out of the temple, battered and bruised, as the island began to sink beneath the waves, but Elwyn had one last trick up his sleeve. In the final moments, he managed to harness a small portion of the island's magic, using it to stabilize the power long enough for them to escape. As the island disappeared beneath the sea, Elwyn and his crew sailed away, their ship battered but intact. The riches they had found were insignificant compared to the power they had witnessed. Elwyn knew that the magic of the island was too dangerous to be left unchecked, and though the island was gone, the knowledge he had gained would ensure that its secrets remained hidden. As the Serpent's Eye sailed into the horizon, Elwyn stood at the helm, his mind heavy with the weight of what had transpired. He had found the island, but at a great cost. And though they had survived, he knew that the true challenge had only just begun. Elwyn stood silently at the helm, his hands resting lightly on the wheel. The steady rhythm of the waves beneath the Serpent's Eye was a stark contrast to the chaos they had just survived. The crew moved quietly around the ship, their movements subdued. The weight of what they had witnessed on the island still lingered in the air, an unspoken tension gripping their hearts. The riches they had brought back seemed almost meaningless compared to the dark power they had narrowly escaped. The horizon stretched out before them, endless and indifferent, but for Elwyn, the world felt smaller now. He had touched something few ever would, something vast and unknowable, and it had left its mark on him. His thoughts churned like the sea, filled with questions he couldn't yet answer. How much of the island's magic had truly been lost when it sank beneath the waves? And what had he really brought back with him? Coulson approached, his usual brisk confidence tempered with a rare solemnity. He glanced up at Elwyn, then out toward the open sea. "We're heading home, Captain." Elwyn gave a slow nod. "For now." Coulson studied him for a moment, as if weighing his words. "And after that?" "The crew's shaken. They need time to come to terms with what happened. They'll have their time." Elwyn's voice was low, thoughtful. "But we can't stay in port forever. There are bigger things at stake now." Coulson leaned on the railing, the creak of the wood mingling with the quiet murmur of the sea. "You're talking about that magic, aren't you? What we saw back there, that wasn't something natural. It's not like anything I've ever encountered before." Elwyn tightened his grip on the wheel. "It was more than magic. It was a force of pure chaos, untouched for centuries. And we unleashed it." He paused, his gaze hardening. "But there's something else, something I couldn't tell you before. That island wasn't just a legend. It was a barrier, a lock holding back that power. Now that it's gone, I don't know what will come next." Coulson's brow furrowed as he processed Elwyn's words. "So, you're saying we may have let something loose? Something that could affect more than just that island?" "Exactly." Elwyn exhaled sharply. "I don't know what's going to happen now. But whatever it is, we have to be ready." The wind picked up slightly, carrying the scent of salt and distant shores. Elwyn let it fill his lungs, grounding himself in the present, even as his thoughts swirled with the uncertainty of the future. He had no idea how far-reaching the consequences of their actions would be, but he knew one thing for certain: this was just the beginning. As the days passed, the ship sailed steadily toward their home port. The crew kept busy with their usual tasks, but the atmosphere remained thick with unspoken fear. No one could forget the island or the terrible power that had been unleashed there. Rook's betrayal and the devastating consequences weighed heavily on everyone, especially Elwyn. He knew he had to keep moving forward, but there was no escaping the sense that they had all crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. One night, when the moon hung low in the sky, casting a silvery glow across the deck, Elwyn found himself staring at the sea. He wasn't alone for long. A soft shuffle of boots on wood announced Coulson's arrival. The first mate leaned on the railing beside him, silent for a moment. "Hard to sleep after everything," Coulson said finally, his voice low. "Can't stop thinking about what we left behind." Elwyn nodded. "I know the feeling." Coulson glanced sideways at him. "You've got that look, Captain. Like you're thinking 2 steps ahead of everyone else. Care to share?" Elwyn hesitated. He hadn't been fully honest with his crew about the true purpose of the journey. He hadn't known who he could trust. But now, after everything they had been through, they deserved the truth. "The island wasn't just a place to find treasure," Elwyn began, his voice steady despite the weight of his words. "It was a containment. A prison for that magic. And now that we've disturbed it, I'm afraid it won't stay contained." Coulson frowned, his sharp mind quickly catching on. "You're saying we might have brought something back with us?" Elwyn shook his head. "Not something. It's more like a potential. A force. It was contained there for a reason, and now that it's free, I don't know what it'll do. But I have to believe there was a reason we were the ones to find it." "You think we're supposed to do something with it? Control it?" "I don't know if it can be controlled," Elwyn admitted. "But I do know this: if we leave it alone, it will grow. It will spread, and it could destroy everything in its path. We have to figure out how to stop that from happening." Coulson fell silent, his gaze fixed on the dark waves below. After a long pause, he spoke again, his voice quiet but resolute. "You've never led us wrong, Elwyn. If you say this is what needs to be done, I'm with you. But the others, they may need more convincing." Elwyn nodded. "They'll come around. They've seen enough to know that this isn't something we can ignore." The journey home felt longer than usual, each day stretched by the weight of uncertainty. When they finally docked at their home port, the crew dispersed quickly, eager to be on solid ground again, to shake off the memories of the island and what had transpired. But Elwyn knew that for him, there would be no escape. The burden of what they had unleashed followed him like a shadow. He stood at the docks, watching the waves lap against the pier, his mind already racing with plans. The world would need to be warned, leaders would need to be rallied, and allies found. This wasn't a fight he could win alone. The island may have been lost, but the battle to control the power it held was only just beginning. Elwyn turned away from the sea and headed into the city. There were people he needed to speak to, preparations to make. He had no idea what the future would bring, but one thing was certain: whatever came next, he would face it head-on. He was a captain, and he had a duty to protect his crew, his home, and the world beyond. As he walked through the bustling streets of the port city, his thoughts drifted back to the island one last time. The magic, the chaos, the power, it had nearly consumed them all. But they had survived. They had fought, and they had won, at least for now. But Elwyn knew better than to think it was over. This was only the beginning, and he was ready for whatever came next.